Senator Breslin, thank you for having us in your hometown and in the Senate.
The great capital.
Exactly. So we've been talking about the IDC and the effects it's had on the Senate and, of course, on Democratic policy. You've been in the Senate for how long?
21 years. This is my 21st year.
Congratulations. You're now legally allowed to drink in the Senate. So in 21 years, you have probably seen the Senate go through a lot. People have been indicted,
Right.
had to leave office for a lot of reasons. There's been, corruption, and of course the IDC came about, 7 years ago. How do you think the IDC is affecting the Senate at this particular moment?
It's a very difficult concept to accept for a Democrat, particularly someone who's very loyal to democratic principles, as I am, and who's been here for a considerable period of time. There couldn't be anything more disruptive to proper legislative life than the IDC.
How so?
I run on a team. Every 2 years I stand for election or have stood for election. And I'm on a team of other Democrats, and our job is to create a majority so that we can pass progressive legislation that has a positive effect on the people of the state of New York. And in my opinion, we would be exercising that majority position, passing lots of favorable progressive legislation if it wasn't for a group of rogue Democrats.
It took a lot to win back the majority in the state. To see it lost so quickly must be incredibly frustrating for you.
It was lost at a difficult time during a tremendous recession where we had to make cutbacks, and when two people, both of whom went to federal prison, jumped to the Republican side.
You have experienced politically the effects of the IDC. You've been challenged. What was that experience?
It was very surprising to me because the explanation of the IDC was that we're better, we can do things, and I viewed myself as a progressive Democrat. I've had various important positions in the Senate. I hold myself to a high state of ethics, and to have to be challenged by fellow Democrats to me was not the proper thing to do.
But it didn't work because you're here.
No, it didn't work.
How much money did they spend?
They used all New York City money. They went to landlords and businesses and Glenwood and raised thousands and thousands of dollars. And it isn't as difficult. You don't need to raise that much money in Albany as compared to a New York City race. So it was a competitive challenge to me, and it was a wonderful summer to go door to door, tell people my story, and tell them about the rogue Democrats. And it turned out to be very successful.
You talk about the money that was flowing into this race. Who are these players who are contributing to the IDC and want to combat progressive legislation from being passed in New York?
Well, I know there was monies from the Glenwood management people. There was money from, quite a bit of money traced through an LLC to a medical malpractice company, and various other individuals that if we tracked them, it was through LLCs or hidden amounts, but you could see it was directly back to the IDC. In fact, I remember looking at one of their returns, and there was $5,000 from an IDC member on the date of the primary.
There's this partnership now with the Independence Party. Can you explain what that all means?
I've read about I think they're looking for a way to possibly avoid some of the limitations in what an individual in the IDC can contribute to an individual campaign as opposed to a party. But beyond that, I don't know a great deal about the new relationship with the Independence Party.
What legislation, personally to you, was most frustrating that you're not able to bring it forward and have a
it's
discussion.
each and every piece of important legislation. I know lots of people, I come from a working class background, and lots of people who are waiting for that minimum wage of $15 to strike. The minimum wage bill could have been so much better if we were organized and unified as a Democratic Party. That's a great example. And in order to be part of that Republican group, they have to give up and sell us out as the traditional Democrats and leave us in the minority.
How, percentage-wise, how much of what the IDC votes on is Republican?
It isn't so much the percentage, it's the ability that the Republican Party, they're like hired hands. They're given chairmanships and prestige. So in return, they sell out the Democratic Party. And so it isn't so much the percentage, it's the importance of the particular votes that they take. They hold the ability to influence the outcomes of legislation. And we all thought as traditional Democrats that if there's 32 Democrats out of 63, we would be controlling the flow of legislation to a more progressive conclusion.
When you look at the remaining Democrats in the Senate, does your entire conference feel this way about the IDC? Or, I mean, they keep gaining new members.
I would hope so. And I might add, I believe that under Andrea Stewart-Cousins and Mike Gianaris, the makeup of the Democratic Conference is by far the best I have seen it in the 21 years I've been here. The quality of the individual, the thoughtfulness of the individual, and the willingness to be part of a team that can make a significant difference is the best I've ever seen.
The culture has clearly shifted.
It sure has, and we're a blue state, and we're being deluged by now the president, the Senate majority in New York State, as well as both houses federally, and the IDC. So it's our importance is that much more as Democrats to take control of the Senate and join with the Assembly to make sure that we prevent that federal intervention.
Other than winning back these seats, or challenging IDC members, or convincing them to come back to the conference, what can the Democrats do at this point?
I don't know whether, I think that we've always looked for the good in people, so we expected them to come back into the fold. Intellectually, to me, there was no reason other than their own advancement that they didn't come back. So now is the time to say they can and should be challenged.
Do they receive money from the Democratic Party still, running on the line?
They don't receive it from the state Senate. I'm sure they receive money from contributors who nominally would be supportive of the Democratic Party who don't understand the significance of the IDC. And it's our job as the Senate to explain to people what they are doing.
Let's talk about redistricting. We're a couple of years away from that whole.
Yep.
How will the IDC affect redistricting and
Oh
possibly
gosh.
more races where you can run more Democrats?
You can actually get into an academic discussion that it all goes back to redistricting. And if you have the ability to control that redistricting process, you really control the difference in the makeup of both the houses and the legislature. The Assembly's not in play. They have over 100 Democratic members. The Senate is very much in play. And if we don't control that process, it could cost us 6 or 7 seats. And you look at districts, it was carved out in such a way that Democrats won by tremendous numbers, and Republicans 3 to 5 percentage points in that range. And I'm surrounded by Republican senators. So in their redistricting, they just tried to push as many Democrats into my district and away from them. And away from the cities, which have a unique set of problems, which I think in many respects are Democratic problems, to make sure the educational system works, to make sure there's proper health care in poorer neighborhoods, and something that it's foreign to the Republican Party. But if we allow them to join with the IDC to carve out districts for the next 10 years, it becomes geometrically more difficult to switch that around.
What do you think the press has gotten wrong or missed out on when it comes to the IDC?
They haven't been vocal enough. It's not a great soundbite. You're always told that if it takes more than a sentence to explain something, you'll lose people. Mm-hmm. And now people are beginning to understand the significance. And I've had more of my friends who really didn't understand, saying, why do you tolerate rogue Democrats who've run on democratic principles and really defrauded their own voters to come join with the Republicans on a year-by-year, this is now 7 years.
Mm-hmm. How likely is it that the governor will step in and as the leader of the party and do something?
I think that we have to, as the real Democrats in the Senate, convince him that it's in his own self-interests and in the interests of the Democratic Party.
What do you think of all the protests that have been occurring in the past few weeks?
I think it's a recognition of the understanding at a grassroots level that they've been sold out, that those groups protesting have been sold out by the IDC.
So the IDC Communications folks are pointing the finger at the Democrats, saying that the Democrats are organizing these protests.
I've watched some of those demonstrations from afar. That's not the kind of groups that you go out and hire and send. You can see people who have heartfelt responses to people who have sold them out. And if I was in one of those districts as a voter, I'd be right there with them.
Are Donald Trump's fingerprints on this at all? I mean, Trump's own advisors have worked in New York State and upstate. Now with all the investigations, you're seeing names that have been, thrown around in New York for decades.
I don't know whether they're involved, but I do know this, that true Democrats are outraged by what's going on in Washington. And they're having a greater vision about what goes on in politics in general. And now the IDC is in view. And they're not seeing a lot of dissimilarities between what's going on in Washington and what's going on in their own backyard. And I think it's had a wonderful influence on people recognizing that rogue Democrats are rogue Democrats, and they're not helping them.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Thank
Any other
you.
Final thoughts on?
Well, I always try to welcome everybody to this great capital city of Albany. It's surpassed in beauty by only Vienna and Paris. I bet you didn't know that in the late 19th century, Troy was one of the 10 largest cities in the United States.
No, I didn't know that.
Right.
I guess Albany to Buffalo and then flow through.
Forget about that. Well, no, the railroad changed it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.